Episode 113, 4 Ways to Restore Broken Character in Leadership.
You're listening to the very best podcast in the world on health, wealth, and happiness. Please remember to leave a review and share with all your friends and family. And here is your host, Lars Hilser.
And we are here on another Wednesday. And you are tuned in, hopefully like every day, to the very best podcast in the world. Your only source in the whole fucking universe or multiverses, if there are such things. We haven't really had, scientists that delivered a convincing answer. In any case, let's stick with the universe, the only source in the universe for personal supremacy through health, wealth, and happiness. Speaking of bullshit filters like we did yesterday. So, that being said, today's episode is going to be about leadership character. And I'm quite tentative and thoughtful, apparently, for once, finding a definition for leadership character, which is more difficult than you would actually grasp, because the term itself is like a shell. And you and pretty much everyone aspiring to be a leader has to fill it with their own character traits, right? That's what the logical conclusion would be if we take apart the words and then, say, okay, this is leadership character, right? So it is something very unique and therefore insanely difficult to define uniformly, which is why I set out on a quest into the intertubes to find a definition that is at least in parts satisfactory. And I found it shortly before frustratingly shutting down the computer and shooting it and throwing it out the window, not necessarily in that order. So the definition that I came across, which basically puts it all together, is, drumroll, the sum of virtues, values, and traits equals good character, which, in addition to competence and commitment, is one of the 3 ingredients that make a leader effective and respected. For many, however, virtues, values, and traits remain indefinable, even elusive. These authors not only define them, they also deconstruct them, in the process demonstrating how character fuels people in their personal journeys to become better leaders. End quote. So, now that everything's said, we can shut down the episode and go. No, we can't, because we're going to basically not speak about how you can become a good leader from the get-go. If you put 1 and 1 together, basically you can take the aforementioned quote apart and take out all of the things that are defined as necessary for a good leadership character from that and build your very own and unique leadership character, period. So that's your homework. If you kind of are not in the position where you would like to call yourself a satisfying leader. However, this episode is not about building it, but essentially repairing it. We're going to restore broken character in leadership. And number one is basically to realign yourself to the principles of the leadership source that helped you build the right leadership character. How is I going to describe that, right? So if you've come off track, right, which happens to everyone, right? Let's say you have a value that you broke for whatever reason. It's about finding your way back, admitting the mistake you made in your in betraying, for instance, that value or that virtue or that trait which kind of made you the leader you are, admitting to yourself that you went wrong, and thereby going back, realigning yourself to your principles of leadership. That's what's meant by the source, right? The source that helped you build the right leadership character. Because, as I mentioned in the beginning, these are very unique characteristics that everyone has, right? No, you can't go to a training course and, have somebody feed you leadership characteristics. It's a process of getting there. It takes experience. More importantly, though, it takes responsibility. And I think those people who are the best leaders were entrusted with responsibility very early in their life, right? I mentioned that in another episode, the responsibilities I was entrusted with at, quite the young age, in my very early 20s, right? And I'm not talking about, taking out the garbage when you were a kid. I'm talking about really responsibilities which, if you betray them or if you don't measure up to them, it has consequences either monetarily or, in the worst case, from a health perspective, right? So that's kind of like the aspect of that. Number 2, surround yourself with stronger leaders who are committed to the right leadership character and can keep you inspired and act as a check to you. I think, the first part sounds easier than it is. Especially if you have these pseudo old school leadership characters that are, basically busy all day demonstrating their dominance and, how they can influence people and so on and so forth. I think true leadership is not about that. True leadership is about being able to be a very good team player. It's about very, very flat hierarchies. And that's what I think is my personal definition of one of the leadership characteristics. I think no one can really, win it for the team without the team. I think that's, kind of like the baseline of it. However, if you surround yourself with stronger leaders, with people who have, who've kind of been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Perhaps they're not necessarily stronger. Maybe they're older, therefore more experienced, therefore more responsibility, right? Maybe it just boils down to that. That's up to your definition and how much you want to surround yourself with all of these alpha primate monkeys who bang their chests all day long about how cool they are and fall for their games while, at the end of the day, there's business to be done, right? And these jerk-offs are usually so busy with their ego that they neglect the duties they were summoned to, first of all. So, that's up to you who you surround yourself with. But it gives you, surrounding yourself with stronger people gives you, is a check to you. That's what the quote really said. But in essence, it's really a proof of humility that you are not the greatest person on the planet. There's always someone that's better than you. Always. And usually they're around the next corner when you least need them. So, that being said, number 3, I think enough said. Number 3, guard your herd by hearing and saying things which can solidify the right leadership character in you. Now, your herd is obviously your subordinates. By definition, don't ever treat your team that way. It will more likely than not backfire, because you're going to have people, if you treat if you treat your team from the top hierarchically, is that a word? I don't know. You're going to have someone stab you in the back sooner or later. If you're part of the team and just wear the leadership hat, then, and integrate well, you're going to be the bestest buddy. And because there's no distance, nobody needs a long arm to stab you. So you're going to have your enemies closer. It's always kind of like the hidden truth in that, right? So hearing and saying things which can solidify the right leadership character in you is basically to strengthen the values and the traits and the virtues you have selected for yourself as your leadership character. So living by them among your team, among the crowd, and staying true to them, most importantly in front of them, and protecting your herd from external influences. That's what this quote is supposed to be about. And that's, just to fix if you fucked up and, kind of went bottom down rather than horizontally. It's like, it's very difficult to get back on track and to reestablish that trust, but you can re-solidify it by admitting that you were wrong to the team, and then, asking whether they're still on board, asking the trust question, and then really getting back on track that way. Last but not least, number 4, make a personal decision and list of what you can do and what you should never do as a leader. I think that basically boils down and is the final manifestation of your thought process of what your virtues, values, and traits as a leader are. It's just about writing them down, thereby manifesting it, and kind of not solidifying, but manifesting it with examples of what you could, should, and would do, and what you could, should, and would not do, right? Because the things you shouldn't do are those that would essentially undermine your leadership character, right? And thereby you strengthen the position. And you can actually, by reviewing those things, if you stepped out of line or whatever, by reviewing them, having written them down somewhere and reviewing them, you can basically restore that broken character in leadership. Now, leadership is something that isn't easily learned from my own observation. And it's very difficult to become a good leader. And again, I think, if you entrust people with responsibility early on, this doesn't go for, not necessarily for kids, but, also there, if you entrust kids with responsibilities like, something stupid, bringing out the garbage or, putting away the groceries when someone comes home from grocery shopping, or, if it's just something stupid but repetitive, and it has a consequence if it isn't done, like feeding the livestock that you have, feeding pets, feeding the dog, feeding the cat. That doesn't necessarily make a good leader from the start, but it teaches the kids to take the first step, right? Because if they are then put into the real world, it's very hard to get them to learn and take responsibility. And I think that's the foundation of what it really boils down to. So, in that sense, let's call it a day. Let's wrap this up. Interesting episode, very reflective. Kind of gone over all of the points, of course, in preparation, but it made me very thoughtful to think about my own career and how I developed into leadership. So that being said, if you have someone, friends, family, colleagues, or whatever who are struggling in a leadership position, send them this episode. Share it with them on www.theverybestpodcastintheworld.com. There are many possibilities to share this through all possible social channels. You can do so from your podcast app, which reminds me that, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. And in that sense, we will be back tomorrow. And until then, have a good day and a successful one. If you've already had that, have a good night. And we'll be back together tomorrow. Stay safe. Peace out.